Monday, and it's time to look at money matters. Chris Gibbons is our business analyst. Chris, this week where it looks like it's going to be dominated really by interest rates on the local front, by the Reserve Bank decision and its interest rates. Let's put you on the spot. Will they hike or won't they?
Good morning, Jeremy. Yes, as always, it's a tough one, but I think the consensus is that they will hike, almost certainly by another 0.25%. There are a couple of folk who think more is needed, a hike of 0.5%, given that inflation was 5.7% in January, very likely to have risen again on the back of the sharp spike in petrol prices. We'll get the February inflation figure on Wednesday. We already know petrol is going to jump again in the month of April, 24 rand a litre for petrol, around 23.60 for diesel, according to the AA. But what Governor Kganyago and his fellow Monetary Policy Committee members will have to balance is not just inflation, but the impact of that petrol price on the broader economy. Consumers have been taking major strain, still are, and it's going to get worse. So yes, we need to tame inflation, but not at the expense of killing an already very sickly economy.
So in reality, what we're left with is something called stagflation,
which is inflation's more evil cousin. Inflation is the rate at which the price of goods and services in an economy increases. Stagflation refers to an economy that has inflation and a slow or stagnant economic growth rate, usually a relatively high unemployment rate. We're also going to get the latest employment data this week. I can forecast, sadly, but I'm sure accurately, that the numbers are going to be awful. So, stagflation, rising prices, but our incomes don't keep up, and many more of us are unemployed. And that's why the Reserve Bank has to think long and hard about how it approaches this problem. Do as much as possible to tame the inflation part of the equation, but do as little as possible to add to the stagnant growth part. It is a contradiction in terms. It is a very, very tough problem to crack.
One of the biggest stories of the week, long-awaited Spectrum auction finally takes place and nets bucket loads of money.
Now, this is the auction of broadband spectrum, which has been on again, off again for a number of years. It is the spectrum that the cell phone companies want to enable them to really roll out the big high-speed 5G programs. Organized by ICASA, it had been expected to bring in about 8 billion rand, but no, instead it raised a whopping 14.4 billion. MTN alone paid 5.2 billion, Vodacom dropped 5.38 billion, and the rest went to the other smaller players in the field. Worth noting that one of them was Telkom, which still has a court challenge underway against the whole process. Telkom argues that an auction like this simply entrenches the dominance of the big players. The deeper your pockets, the more you can pay, obviously. The Telkom court case due to start next month.
One of the country's biggest credit bureaus is hacked, and the criminals are demanding a huge amount of money.
Yes, it is TransUnion, which, according to IT Web, has confirmed that its South African server has been hacked by a Brazilian group. TransUnion says the criminals are demanding some $15 million to prevent the stolen data from being leaked. That's about 224 million rand. To their credit, TransUnion say they are not going to pay. How did the crooks get in? Well, apparently they used a client's genuine credentials. The IT Web report says the data includes local consumers' ID numbers, addresses, phone numbers, as well as details on things like assets, including houses, cars, insurance policies, so on. Anything, in fact, bought on credit.
So what do the hackers actually do with this stuff?
Usually it's sold to other criminals who will then contact the individuals concerned and try to persuade them that it is their bank calling, and please, we just need to help you reset your PIN and your password. Remember, no South African bank will ever contact you by phone or email and ask you to disclose PIN or password. So if you do get a call of that nature, believe me, it's a scam.
I see Anglo-Americans going green with a little bit of help from France.
France's big government-controlled power generator, Électricité de France, to be precise. In a statement just before the weekend, the two companies say they have agreed to jointly develop on-site and off-site solar and wind farms with between 3,000 and 5,000 megawatts of capacity over the next decade. They also intend to establish storage facilities and to help bolster local manufacturing. Eskom reckons we need between 4,000 and 6,000 megawatts to have a secure supply, so this Anglo plan should go a long way to helping. Just a pity they can't move a bit quicker.
Markets sharply up and then sharply down, and a bit of a wild ride for two of our heavyweights, Naspers and Prosus.
The first 2 days of last week, Jeremy, saw massive falls for both. Prosus lost more than 100 billion rand on Tuesday, but then both came storming back on Wednesday, with Prosus up 22% at one stage. What's going on here? Well, I'm sure everyone knows that Naspers owns Prosus, and Prosus in turn owns 29% of China's largest internet and gaming company, Tencent. We know the tech sector has been under pressure for some while in China from the government there. Think back to the non-listing of Jack Ma's Ant Financial Group last year. But then we had a report in one of the big US papers that Tencent was about to be hit with a record fine for allowing its WeChat Pay app to be used for money laundering. Hit the sell button, quick! That was Monday and Tuesday. But by Wednesday, the alleged fine seemed to have evaporated. No more reports or indeed confirmation. We also had a much more emollient statement from a very senior Chinese government official about allowing market forces to work properly, encouraging investment, and all that sort of thing. Quick, hit the buy button! Magnifying so much of this, the war in Ukraine, which makes everything just so much more volatile and nervous.
So where does this leave Naspers and Prosus? I mean, given that just about anyone who has any form of South African pension fund will be exposed to them. I think that's an important question.
Indeed it is, and the answer is that it leaves both companies vulnerable to the whims of an increasingly authoritarian Chinese government. I was reading the latest edition of The Economist over the weekend. They have a very interesting leader analysing the state of play between the West and the rest, if I can put it as crudely as that. Remember when the Berlin Wall came down, the Soviet Union fell apart, 1989, 1991. Hope was that a combination of free trade and freedom would lead countries like Russia and China into a warm, fuzzy, democratic embrace. We would all live happily ever after. Well, the free trade has happened, but where's the freedom in places like Russia and China? The Economist points out that people living in democracies now account for less than 50% of the world's population. Says The Economist, the vision of the 1990s that free trade and freedom would go hand in hand has fractured. Liberal governments need to find a new path that combines openness and security and prevents the dream of globalization going sour. Until that happens, I would venture to suggest that Naspers and Prosus could go one way or the other. And that won't depend on whether their businesses are successful. It will depend on the wishes of President Xi Jinping.
Finally, let's end off on a subject that I know is close to your heart, and in this particular case, very close to mine, because it's the team that I support. Premier League football, relating to the forced sale of Chelsea Football Club. Where are we on that one?
Well, Jeremy, the starting point is that if you want to follow Roman Abramovich, you have to be a billionaire or in a consortium of multimillionaires. That's if you want to emulate Chelsea's success under Abramovich. He's just written off a loan to Chelsea of £1.5 billion. And of course, as we know, he spent huge sums since buying the club in 2003. Bids for Chelsea closed on Friday evening, and most of the heavyweights are American. Top of the list, Todd Bailey, former president of Guggenheim Partners, who's in a partnership with Clearlake Capital, Swiss billionaire Hans-Jörg Weiss, and a UK property developer, Jonathan Goldstein. Then there's another UK property developer, Nick Candy. He says he's put more than £2 billion on the table. Another American, Citadel founder Ken Griffin. He's teamed up with the Ricketts family, who own the Chicago Cubs. Josh Harris, co-founder of Apollo Global Management, has teamed up with Martin Broughton. Broughton, a former chairman of British Airways and Liverpool FC. Howard Marks' Oak Tree Capital, reported to be in the running. And last, but by no means least, Woody Johnson, who owns the New York Jets. Johnson, as in Johnson & Johnson, the consumer products and pharmaceuticals company. So his pockets would certainly be deep enough. Now, Chelsea's problem is that all these Americans will want to run the club as a business, as the Crankies have shown at Arsenal, the Glazers at Manchester United. Roman Abramovich has run Chelsea as a personal hobby, funded by an apparently bottomless money pit. That is going to be a very hard act to follow.
Thank you, Chris. We'll talk to you again next week. And until then, from Mansfield Today, bye-bye.